Well, President Trump has gone and done it again. This time he's snatching babies out of the arms of illegal immigrants as they cross the border into the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green. This episode of Right Angle brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. Well, men, I knew that you knew that Donald Trump was capable of unbelievable depths of depravity. In this case, as we've heard lately, little children are being snatched from their parents as they're making the border crossing. And then not only that, they're being placed into homes somewhere and then being lost. The U.S. government has lost track of some 1,400 or 1,500 of these children. Gentlemen, there's so many complications to this from a legal perspective and from just a practical perspective of how things works. But let me suffice it to say this before I ask you a simple question. Suffice it to say that nothing's really changed between the Obama administration and the Trump administration, other than the fact that during the Obama administration, there were probably more children for which the government could not account because they had so-called lost track of them. In reality, they haven't really lost track of them. The Department of Health and Human Services actually finds relatives and friends that are sponsors for these kids if they have to be placed into somebody else's home, and then those people are responsible for the kids. So we haven't lost children, okay? Some people just then transfer them to other relatives or whatever. The kids are okay in most cases. The challenge becomes at the border, if you come across the border illegally, you've committed a misdemeanor. If you commit a misdemeanor, you deserve your day in court. The people at the border who handle that process are actually pretty quick about it. They do take kids away from their families briefly while that legal process gets carried out, typically in a single day. I'm not saying it always happens that way, but typically that's how it happens. And then they give the kids back to you and they ship you back to your home country. However, if you insist on staying by making a claim of asylum, then you've got to be detained for a longer period of time. And we can't detain families together because we don't have enough space that are family-friendly spaces to do this. Because in the old days, the people who came across the border were almost all young men. They were not coming across as families. But because of lenient U.S. policy, we've now lured more families to come across together because people are being told, hey, bring your kids, they'll go easy on you. So anyway, lots of detail to ask a simple question. Guys, this is a complicated issue. I mean, people want to be in the United States. They want to get here any way they can. The bureaucracy of dealing with the Immigration and Customs Enforcement people and the Homeland Security and all that kind of stuff is complicated. We don't make it easy for people to do this process. And I admire anybody who does go through the process. But what do you do with the kids? Stephen Green, if somebody comes across the border illegally, is there a moral way of handling this question?
Scott Ott, have you no decency, sir? Have you no decency? Bringing facts and reason and reasonability into this case when the media is busy brewing up a huge anti-Trump storm? Have you lost your mind, sir? No. Okay,
Fairly.
Listen. Yeah, I mean, this is a complicated case, and you're dealing with the massive federal bureaucracy, which is creaky and awful in the best of times, in a situation where President Obama changed a policy, former President Obama changed a policy that has, as you said, encouraged people to bring their kids into the country illegally, and then, of course, the left whips up this big anti-Trump firestorm because of the same stuff, the exact same processes that were going on under the Obama administration. What's been really fun to watch in sort of a sad yet shocked way is CNN ran a headline today. I mean, all of these stories about how awful and how unique this is to the Trump administration, all these stories got debunked over the weekend on Twitter and in various outlets.
Yeah.
And yet CNN on Monday or Tuesday, after all of this debunking, ran a headline about how Trump is using children of immigrants to whip up hysteria, when all of the hysteria whipping has been on the other side by outlets like CNN. And who's the guy who says he's a comic that's a CNN contributor? Dean, I can never pronounce his last name. I think it's Dean.
I thought all of them were.
Artichoke. or whatever his name is. But he went on Twitter on Memorial Day. The son of a veteran had his dad's picture up on his Twitter profile for Memorial Day, and he asked Dean Okie Dokie Artichoke, whatever his name is, about something, and Dean said, "Well, why are you asking me this? And are you an actual Nazi?" Looking at the Twitter profile of his dad wearing a U.S. Army uniform.
Oh my goodness.
And the guy very reasonably said, "That's a picture. That picture is not of me. That picture is of my father. He is wearing a U.S. Army uniform. He was killed in Vietnam." And this Dean fellow had to apologize, but his apology was prefaced with a slam on Trump and Trump supporters. We are all Nazis to these people, and that's why we have to fight, even on stupid issues like this, day after day after day. But you know what? We're in the fight, and I'm okay with it. I hope you guys are too.
Well, Bill Whittle, as you may have seen, Ivanka Trump, the daughter of the President of the United States, actually posted a picture on Twitter of herself and I believe her 2-year-old son. It was an adorable picture of a mom and a child. And, you know, it's the kind of thing that I actually posted on Instagram, kind of thing that people post on Instagram all the time. And it caused an unbelievable firestorm of controversy because, of course, while Ivanka Trump is holding her 2-year-old, her dad is yanking 2-year-olds out of the arms of immigrant mothers who are fleeing from desperate situations in Honduras and Guatemala and Nicaragua and Mexico. It's what I hate about all this, Bill, is it turns into a sideshow what is a serious, not only a serious legal question of how does a nation conduct itself at its own borders in a way that secures the nation but is still welcoming to immigrants, but it treats children as if they were just posters for a cause and not real kids who have real problems and, you know, and frankly in many cases why their parents were coming here. Bill, is there a moral answer to this question that a government could carry out?
Yes, you could enforce your borders so that this situation doesn't occur in the first place. I mean, if you had a secure border, you wouldn't have to deal with the problem of children of illegal immigrants because there wouldn't be any illegal immigrants. And as far as the cruelty of all this goes, and the unreasonableness of it, I had some heavy news last week. My wife's daughter, who's a grown adult, who she hasn't seen in 2 years, who I've never met, applied for a simple tourist visa to the United States from Russia and was declined.
Oh, no.
And that status will stay there essentially for the rest of time unless she can show sufficient cause that something has changed. This is a grown adult photographer who wants to come to America for 3 weeks as a tourist on an airline to see her mother and then go home, and it was declined. Now, of course, if I'd had any sense, I would have had her go to Mexico. Because if she'd gone to Mexico, she could have simply trotted across the border and then, at worst case scenario, might have been convicted of a misdemeanor, as Scott pointed out, and we'd have housing for her and all kinds of public benefits here in California. She'd have her driver's license already. So the answer to your question about morality of children is you prevent the problem by removing the incentive. I mean, that's what you do. We consistently, the left this is the left's entire operating procedure, is you try to divorce cause and effect. And I forget who said it, but it's absolutely true. That what you subsidize, you get more of. When you subsidize, when you reward people for bringing their kids, you're going to have more kids separated from their families because they're rewarded for bringing their families. If they were immediately just simply taken across the border where they came in from and left there, then you would have incentive not to bring your families. And this is the thing that they just do not seem to be able to understand. And so, once again, these children being separated from their adults are being separated from their adults not because of Donald Trump. They're being separated from their adults because of progressive policies that have let everybody in the world know that if you come to America and bring your kids, there's no borders here, there's no walls, you're welcome here, we'll give you all the benefits you want, you can live like a king, and all of this stuff. And if they simply were to allow us to have a border, we wouldn't need a wall. And then people would have to do the same thing that my daughter-in-law has to do, which is apply for the U.S. Embassy and show reasonable cause that they go back home. And even then, it's not guaranteed. So my wife is separated from her daughter, and there's very little we can do about it.
Hey, Bill, can I throw something in here just real quick? It's one of those things that it's a quote that I read years ago, and it's so simple and so profound and explains so much. And maybe our viewers can tell me who wrote this or who said it. I want to say it was Thomas Sowell, but I haven't been able to find it in any of his writings. But what the statement was show me a man's incentives, and I will tell you how he behaves.
There you go. Beautiful line. That sounds
it's that
like
simple. It does, but I can't find it anywhere. So again, if any viewers can point me to what that is, I would love to know. I can't find it on the web or anywhere.
You know, I have probably considered by many in conservative ranks as a softie on some of this immigration stuff, only because I've got this crazy notion that we, as the most powerful and welcoming nation on earth, should have a way to process the people that want to come here in one way or another legally. And I don't fully blame people from other countries who want to come here and who can't find a way to do so legally for exploring extra legal means, let's say, or illegal means, as we like to call them. So I can understand the motivation of somebody trying to get the hell out of Honduras, frankly. I can understand the motivation of somebody who doesn't want to live among the drug cartels anymore. I think that we do ourselves no favors as a nation by having this morass of bureaucracy that is the first welcome that we give to people who want to come to this country, whether on a tourist visa, like Bill's relative, or somebody who wants to come and start a new life. There is a process, though. And the process is, if you are fleeing from some sort of threat that you want to seek asylum in the United States, you don't seek it after you cross the border illegally. That's not the way it's done. You go to a place called a U.S. embassy. If you can't do it in your own country, you go to the nearest safe country where you can do it. So let's say you're in Nicaragua or whatever, and you feel threatened. If you can get to Costa Rica, or if you can get to Mexico or whatever, you go there and then you apply for asylum. And that application process then has a sequence of events. If you do it, and now, in fairness to the people who are doing this, I'm guessing that's a bureaucratic mess too. And so the people look at it and they go, holy cow, I'm never going to get out of here if I go through the normal process. Tell you what, I've heard that if you just walk across the border, that the nice American people are not going to throw you out. And for years, we've been incentivizing people to bring their children along as an insurance plan. There were human shields because they knew that the Border Patrol people only have some 3,000 family shelters, so to speak, where they can house people. And so then they have to release you into the country and hope they find you again. Well, unfortunately, they don't find you again in most cases, and you wind up, running free and have undocumented status. And so there are a lot of factors that go into this. But I think that if the law means anything at all, it has to mean the same thing all the time. It has to be consistent. So whatever we as a country are going to decide that we mean about a border, we need to be consistent about that. It's like parents who make threats against their children for punishment that they never carry out. I've talked to parents about this before, and I've said you would be better to let the misbehavior continue than to make threats that you don't intend to enforce, because you've completely screwed up your credibility with the kids. Don't threaten them with something you don't intend to do. And so that's all I would say, is to the United States government, let's have a process that we mean. And let's apply that process even-handedly with equal justice for all. I don't think we need to build a bunch of, thousands more family housing units along the border so we can, adjudicate asylum cases here. I think we'd be well off to establish a better asylum-seeking process in the places where that's supposed to happen. And at our border crossings, when people do commit that misdemeanor first-time entry into this country, that should be treated as a crime, it should be processed as rapidly as possible, and that they should be sent home. It doesn't seem complicated when you think of it in terms of law and of a U.S. Constitution. Where it gets complicated is when you start saying, well, my heart is better than the law. And what I think is right at this moment is the way things ought to be. Instantiate what you think in your heart into law, and then you won't have these constant conflicts and quandaries. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.